Our next guest is sharing how character shapes leadership at the highest level. In his new book, Make Your Mark, Lessons in Character from 7 Presidents, he reveals what we can learn from those who have held our nation's highest office. Please welcome ABC News contributor and presidential historian, Mark Updegrove. Great to have you. So congratulations on this book. You wrote this in this book that the defining character traits that have shaped our country's leaders, they're diverse among the different leaders, but you really lean into this idea of character and how it impacts their presidency. What made you want to write this book now?
You know, 2,500 years ago, the Greeks wrote, "Character is destiny." Listen, and that sentiment resonates today as much as it has in 3 millennia. And the stakes are so high today. And you can see in particular, in the character of our presidents, that character is the rudder that to a large extent guides the destiny of this nation and the world. And I wanted to look at the presidents that I have known and spent a little bit of time with and show the character trait that underlied the great accomplishments of his administration.
And for each president, you boil their legacy down to basically one sentence. So Jimmy Carter's mission to do good in areas of peace and human rights, George W. Bush's charge to give back during the AIDS and HIV epidemic, just going unchecked through a lot of the developing world. What do you think is more important to a president's legacy? Their character or their accomplishments, and how do you weigh the two?
You know, listen, I think they're completely intertwined, right? The character of a president underlies the decisions he makes and determine the accomplishments that he accrues during the course of his administration. So I think the two are completely, inextricably linked. And you see that again in the essays that I write in this book. You talked about George W. Bush. And giving back, I think, is part of the ethos of the Bush family. He learned it from his parents. They learned it from their parents. This nation that had given them so much, and they taught their children to give back. And George W. Bush brought that sensibility to the presidency. And when the AIDS epidemic was ravaging much of the world, in particular sub-Saharan Africa, he created the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR it was called, 22 years ago. And since that time, it has saved the lives of 28 million people worldwide for a minimal investment to Americans. That's more than the population of Australia.
Unbelievable. We had Bill Gates on The View recently, and he credited PEPFAR as being one of the most successful aid organizations in history. So I'm glad you highlight that. Now, you write about 7 presidents, all of whom you've had the opportunity to interview. In your experience, how concerned are presidents with their legacy? You know,
Barack Obama, on the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Civil Rights Act at the LBJ Library, said, "In this great democracy, you realize you're but a swimmer in the currents of history. But being president gives you a chance to bend those currents." And I think that's what you have to think about as president. How do you bend the currents of history? You can't worry about history. You have to worry about what you do in that moment and hope that those currents eventually flow toward the right direction. What can you do to affect the greatest good for the greatest number in America? And then let history decide what happens.
We mentioned, you and I were talking off air, but Jimmy Carter, somebody who left office after 1 term, but became one of the most beloved presidents in his post-presidency, focused on charity, just giving back to his community. Now, a quality you assigned to President Obama, which I think is very accurate, is grace. In the book, you specifically write about this picture as an example of that. What does this picture say about President Obama's grace?
That's a great shot. So this is just several months after Barack Obama became the first African-American president. And that is a little kid who is visiting the Oval Office with his father. He's an outgoing member of the administration. As you know, presidents often take pictures with those who are leaving the White House. And the child said, "Is your hair like mine?" This is a child who could not relate to the presidents who had gone before. They didn't look like him. And President Obama answered the question by leaning his 6'2" frame at a 90-degree angle and saying, "You feel for yourself."
It honestly makes me tear up every time. It's such a great moment of the beginning of the presidency. Our 2 most recent presidents, Joe Biden and President Trump, are not included in the book. Why was that?
Well, I think their legacies are very much in the balance. President Trump continues his presidency for a non-consecutive 2nd term. So we have yet to see what history will say about his administration. And when I was writing the book, and I also have never interviewed President Trump. I have interviewed Joe Biden, but Joe Biden was in the office when I was writing the book, and his legacy, too, is in the balance given revelations that we have heard about his presidency since then.
And legacies need time to breathe.
They do.
Something that I've always loved, at least up until this sort of volatile, polarized moment we're in, is there's always been this camaraderie between former presidents. People are always surprised that, you know, George W. Bush and Barack Obama have a positive relationship. The Clintons and the Bushes do. What surprises you the most about these sort of presidential friendships that span partisan lines?
You know, that's very American, that sensibility, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people in foreign nations who look at this and say, this is how it should be. It's not in their nations, but it is here. And I think that's because presidents, when they're in office, when they leave office, realize they're the president of all Americans. They're symbols of what it is to be American. They're not Republicans and Democrats. They are symbols of what it is to be American. And I think they root each other on. There's a wonderful letter that George H.W. Bush left for Bill Clinton upon leaving the White House. He was defeated by Clinton in 1992. And in 1993, when he left the White House, he left this great letter in which he said, your success is our country's success. I'm rooting hard for you. This is somebody who had been defeated by that same man. But he realized that if Clinton succeeded, it meant that America succeeded. And that was what was most important to George H.W. Bush.
You have to imagine they also know how uniquely hard the job is. It's a lot easier once you've done it to kind of give more grace to others who have held those roles. I want to ask you finally, is there a presidential moment or quote that stands out to you and has stayed with you the most?
Alyssa, there are so many. But the one that I think of recently is by Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ, who said, any jackass can kick down a barn door, but it takes a damn fine carpenter to build one. And I think hate and destruction are easy, and they're also, you know, often political expedients. But hope and destruction, that's hard. We are a better nation, though, when we are hopeful, when we are building together. And I hope we abide by that sentiment today and think about what we can do to build a better America.
Very well said. Mark, thank you for joining us. You can buy his book, Make Your Mark, Lessons in Character from 7 Presidents, wherever books are sold. Have a great day.